you can see just how intriguing and investigatory these people are. So any doctor that's on Doctor's Night Out, I want you to know, these are doctors that I know, love, and trust. And here's what that means. It means that these are doctors who are completely committed to integrity. They're completely committed to growth, authenticity. These are what you find to be the true truth seekers. Because that's really what we are. We're truth seekers, and we are here to service you. So in the spirit of that, last time we were here, we had a pretty in-depth conversation about many facets of what's going on right now with COVID-19. And we really unraveled a lot, but yet there were still so many questions coming in, and we know this is so ever-changing. Let's give you the latest facts. So the latest facts, total cases are 435,000, just over. Total deaths worldwide are 19,625. Total recoveries, 109,926. The pending cases are 305,455. Current hospitalizations, 30,811. They tested positive. 3,805, that's 12% of those people that tested positive are hospitalized, and 888 are in the ICU. That's 3% of positives. So that's where we are today. And with this, of course, comes lots of questions. So if you have any questions as we go along, or it stirs any thought from you, please feel free to let us know. We're here tonight to answer your questions. And the first one I'd like to get to, and Stacey, Dr. Cabeca is also muted, if we could unmute her. We have some, first I want to say Dr. Anna Cabeca, amazing doctor, has done so much. She is the girlfriend doctor. She's done a lot with hormones and obstetrics and many other things. Dr. Pedre, functional medicine doctor. I just say he just knows everything. I don't even know what else to say. All these people are champions. Dr. Cook is an anesthesiologist, and he is really committed. An unbelievable amount of his time and energy goes to how can we figure this out? What can we do to serve people? He is so on this COVID-19. It really is heartwarming. Dr. Shah, Dr. Amy Shah, she is one of the most incredible physicians that I've ever come across. From the moment I met her, I was completely just blown away. She's another complete brainiac. By the way, all these people have more degrees that you can possibly imagine. And so she's done so many different things. She's known as the fasting MD, the fasting doc. You should follow her on Instagram, as well as everyone else. All these people are committed to good content, good solid content. But Dr. Shah really has done a lot for women in the face of a lot of challenges, and she's still in the trenches. And I just want to say, the doctors that you see here, everyone here, they're all seeing patients, all of them. And a lot of them could do a lot of other things because they're all branded doctors, and they're choosing to see patients because they're in service of you. So without further ado, let's start with the questions. I want to start one for Dr. Cabeca. Dr. Cabeca, you had said earlier that you had a very interesting question from a patient, and I would guess that a lot of people are really, this is stupefying people. It's the idea of sex. Who can we have sex with now? That's the question. Dr. Cabeca, tell us the question, and if you could give us some reasoning on this.
Yes. So a client wrote in, and she said that, her husband's working at the hospital and is in the trenches, right? And the question is, does he come home, sleep in bed with them, with her? And, how do you do social distances at that point? What's the answer? What are rules or guidelines around this? How much risk are they at? And should they have sex? I mean, is the virus transmitted by sex? And I said, I've got to get back to you on this. So I spent some time really digging in. There's some authorities that say, well, it's not transmitted by sex, but that doesn't really make sense, does it? Because it's transmitted in the mucus. And so we know that it would be transmitted in the mucus or through kissing. And so that is a reality, and just contact. So the challenge is, like, we're joking, like, how lucky do you feel about getting lucky? You know what I mean? So this is there's the serious side that ideally they have a self-quarantine place. I brought my daughter back from Holland, and just, although no exposures or anything, she is self-quarantined at one side of the house, and we keep a social distance. So if you're doing the hand washing, gargling, protective outerwear, leaving that outside, washing, showering, soaping off really well when you come in the house, you're reducing the risk. You're certainly reducing the risk of contamination, but you're not eliminating it. So how healthy is your family unit? And what exposures do your family unit have to other people and other people who are at risk? So that's where it really gets complicated, and we have to use common sense. On the extreme end, they're self-quarantined, and I've heard of some physicians, they've tented up in the garage, and they are going to work and sleeping in, they're camping out in their garages. And then others that are still integrating. And I guess that's really a challenge. I definitely want to bring this to the team because I know everyone's going to have an opinion and thought.
I wanted to say something to that, because if you think about what doctors are having to do because of the short supply of masks, I would say that doctors are probably, who are working in the front line in hospitals, are probably 10 times at risk of getting it than just a regular person, just from being exposed to multiple people. But also, they're having to reuse masks that should be disposed of as soon as you've seen one patient, and they're reusing it for an entire day and then saving it, washing it, and then saving it for the next day. So, just to comment on that, whether they should be quarantined, probably thinking that they are at probably 10 times increased risk of getting it, they're going to bring that home as well.
And so
I agree with the idea of delayed gratification.
Dr. Cook.
On that note, that's a good comment, because apparently in China, what they were doing a lot of times is, if the healthcare workers were sequestered from their families for the whole time they were doing it, and so the healthcare workers were sequestered at a specific location, and so I don't think we know what the best answer is, but there's no good answer for how bad this is. But healthcare workers are a super high risk. And so we need to collaboratively kind of figure out and come to some consensus, I think, because we have to figure out how to take care of ourselves.
Dr. Shah, question for you. So if somebody is at home and the doorbell rings and a package is delivered to them, do they have to be worried about grabbing that package? Because we are learning all kind of things about, does the virus exist on something like cardboard or something, in a paper? So what do we do if the doorbell rings and a package is there? Do we grab it? And if we do take it, what precautions and measures do we take?
That's a great question. I think we are just learning more and more about how long the virus lasts on surfaces. As you know, there's a New England Journal paper that says it can be aerosolized in the air after someone. So say the delivery person, you assume that they're really sick and they cough or sneeze or, have some respiratory droplets suspended in the air, for 2 hours, or it can land on the surface of the package. And like I said, we don't really know all the details, but all the things that are coming out is that if you're going to, for example, pick up a package from outdoors, maybe you wait till evening, or you wear gloves when handling that package. There's no right or wrong thing, but you have to think that it's infected, think that there's a respiratory droplet on there or droplets on there. And I don't know if anybody's figured out the perfect way to do this, but that's how I would approach it.
Okay. I have a comment on that because we're running a business, right, with supplements. What we do is every box before it comes in is sprayed, and that's like in its own self-quarantine for the duration of that day. It's brought in overnight, and we have ozone circulating overnight when there's no one working. And so that's how we've been also double checking, double treating, and then opening the packages and spraying as well. So trying on every level to keep that extra level of precaution.
Another question we have here. Dr. Pedre stated that all dairy increases mucus. Is that all liquid dairy, or is that cheese, yogurt? What kind of dairy? And how about almond milk instead of cow's milk? So
it's all dairy, and it's dairy in all its forms. I also saw a question, so I'm going to comment on the almond milk because they've looked at how people might react or have sensitivities to all different types of milk, and dairy milk always comes up quite high on the top. But surprisingly, when they tested a random group of people, they found that a small amount of them also reacted to almond milk. So sometimes almonds themselves can also cause excess mucus. And I also saw someone ask about camel milk because camel milk has been used a lot, especially in the Asperger's syndrome autism spectrum community, because it happens to be the milk that is closest to human milk and is the most hypoallergenic of all the different animal milks that you can get.
Not goat. It's not goat milk?
No, goat milk still falls somewhere in between, but camel milk is the milk that is most like human milk when you compare it. And people tend to have less reactions to that. And actually, they've done studies where they show that camel milk can be healing and helps reverse reactions to foods. But then, when it comes to dairy, I can say kind of blanket statement, cheese, all dairy products, including whether it's goat or cow. But when it comes to the nut milks, it's kind of an individual thing, and you have to really pay attention to how your body reacts when you have some almonds, or if you have a glass of almond milk. Like, do you find that you're needing to clear your throat afterwards? And if you're needing to clear your throat, then that's a sign that it made you create more mucus.
So another question, I'm going to field this one to Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, is it possible to have a test for coronavirus and receive a negative test and then become infected in a day or two?
Well, of course, that would be possible. But then what's also possible is that there are a lot of people that are that have a not effective of enough swab, and so they can get a false negative from that. And then you can still swab effectively and get a false negative from that. And then there may be people who had an infection a month ago, and but they might have some symptoms, and they could have a test that would be negative even though they were exposed recently. And then finally, we know that this affects, as we were talking the other day, the upper respiratory tract, but it can also infect the enterocytes in the gut because there's ACE receptors on those cells as well. And so there's some evidence that for 2 weeks after the upper respiratory symptoms go away, people can still be shedding from in their stool virus. And so they would have quote unquote a negative test and think that they're okay, but they'd still be shedding. And so they'd be very high risk for spreading to other people with a false sense of security from the negative test.
So
I think for that, I mean, we haven't completely proven that there's a fecal oral route of transmission for this virus. So I think that's something we need to look at.
Okay. Another question. I'm 62 and my trainer is putting together a workout at the park with minimum distance apart. With a minimum distance apart. The sessions will be 45 to 60 minutes with a minimum of 6 people. I will be using a sanitizer and gloves. Should I cancel? Is this something I can still attend? So I'm going to field that one to Dr. Shah.
I saw that one. That's a really tough one. So here's the thing. If it was my family, and we did this weekend, we spread out on the grass and we did a workout virtually. And if there was another family member that you've been hanging out with, like in your social distancing week, but this is what you're talking about here is potentially going to the park and being on surfaces where people you don't know could be there and are maybe coughing and sneezing. it's not a clear-cut answer, I would say, because if you're 6 feet apart, it's kind of like the same thing as going on a trail and seeing someone 6 feet away, or going on a bike ride and seeing someone 6 feet. You could argue for sure that it's very similar to that. But would I want to meet up with 6 strangers at a park and do this at this time? I'd probably say, let's wait a couple weeks for that.
So maybe take on another form of exercise. Maybe walking by yourself is best right now.
Yeah, or there's a the problem with this scenario is you're talking about people you don't really know. You don't know if they're sick or not. You don't know if they're going to be sharing equipment or not. We don't know if there's going to be fomite, spread through changing positions. There's so many variables that you can't control in this scenario.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this one, Dr. Pedre, there are conflicting reports out there right now, one of which explains why we shouldn't be taking vitamin A or D. Is this true, and what supplements should I be taking?
I heard about that. Across the board, vitamin D has been shown to be protective and a way to boost the immune system because of the mechanism by which vitamin D works. It activates our innate immunity, which is another way to say it is it basically activates the primitive part of your immune system that doesn't have to be specific to the invader that's coming. Whereas antibodies, they have to go to the factory and they have to be minted and be made special for that invader, for the virus. So that's the reason it takes a little while to create antibodies, because your white blood cells have to go to the factory and then make them. But the innate immunity lets you attack an invader immediately. There are these antimicrobial proteins. And what vitamin D does is it activates that innate system. And that's really important and key in the early fight against infection. And when I was doing research on the pandemic flu back in the days of the swine flu, and looking at why did people die from like the 1918 pandemic flu, and one of the things that I found in the research was that a lot of the people who died from the worst fulminant pneumonia were vitamin D deficient. So vitamin D in some ways, you have to think of it as vitamin D is kind of like a conductor. It conducts the immune system to act, but also to act appropriately and not to act excessively. So vitamin D is really useful for that. Vitamin A is different because we have to be careful with vitamin A recommendations and what I've said before. For pregnant women, vitamin A can be a teratogen. So for any pregnant woman, you do not want to take high doses of vitamin A, or if you think you might be pregnant. But otherwise, if you're not, vitamin A is a great antiviral, and also it actually helps activate thyroid hormone, your metabolic hormone, that regulates all of the processes that are happening inside your cells. Vitamin A is necessary for thyroid hormone to be able to act and do what its signal into the nucleus. So it's a really critical vitamin, but there's other ways to get it also, through carrots, through foods that are in orange in color, like sweet potatoes. But that would be the caution I have. And I heard this today from a patient that there was circulating in the internet that you shouldn't take vitamin D. I think acutely you can do something like this. In the long term, where we have to balance out how much vitamin D a person takes and the influx of calcium, and no one should be taking vitamin D without K2 in order to be able to balance and direct where that calcium goes so it doesn't deposit too much in the arteries and cause cardiovascular disease. So hopefully I clarified that for people, because it's very important to understand those.
Tell people what K2 is. People ask me that all the time. They don't know what it is. Tell them what it is and what K2 is.
It's a type of vitamin K. It's found in fermented products. So for example, like natto from fermented soy, and it's also found in Gouda and Edam cheese. But it's the type of vitamin K also known as menaquinone. And it basically helps cross-link the fibers in the bone. So when vitamin D brings in calcium, and it can make your bones strong, but if you have a strong and rigid structure, if you fall, it's not going to have bend and it can crack. So what vitamin K2 does is it allows the cross-linking of the fibers. So then your bone, and people don't think about this, but bone is flexible also. So if you fall, the bone has some give, because now it's almost like earthquake proofing a building. Basically, the vitamin K2 earthquake proofs your bones so that if you fall, they're more resistant to breaking.
How many IUs a day are you recommending of vitamin D?
Vitamin D, generally 5,000 units for adults daily, and that's pretty much across the board what I find. And I've been doing vitamin D level testing to make sure that that is correct, and I test patients before and after. And most people are just not getting enough sunshine, especially in New York in the upper latitudes. And then if someone, I mean, sometimes I have to have patients who are taking 10,000 units, because some people genetically have resistance to vitamin D through the receptors, so you have to give them a higher dose. And on an acute basis, I will have my patients dose anywhere between 50 and 100,000 units the minute that they get a fever. And I've tested this over and over, used it on my patients, used it on myself. I found that once you take a high dose of vitamin D, vitamin D3, usually the fever breaks within 24 hours.
That is
Now,
incredible.
with this virus, what I've been finding, because I've been treating a number of patients who I suspect have it, I haven't been able to test everyone, and I don't want to send patients to the hospital to get tested. But what I found is that if it's already been running for a couple of days and you didn't get that high dose vitamin D early on, even if you take it, you're still going to continue to spike fevers. So with any viral infection, the earlier you can get there with these preventative remedies, the more effective they are.
Dr. Pedre, in regards to vitamin D, another question came in regards to vitamin D and the role of vitamin C as well in boosting the immune system. And that's also been a rumor and questions I've received in terms of, is it bad to take?
We were going to talk about
lots
this
of rumors.
tonight.
Let's hold off on that. I do want to talk about vitamin C. Dr. Pedre and I actually had a very good conversation offline about this. There's a lot of interesting information, and that's kind of a chunk. So let's move on a little bit, and then we're going to talk about protocols, but we're going to have a big discussion on vitamin C. I'm going to swing this one to Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, tell us again, because people are still interested and curious, when you go to a doctor and they suspect you have it or you've been tested for it, we know all about this hydrochloroquine, and tell us about these medications. Do they work? And I keep getting these questions and they keep coming in. Should they be taking them prophylactically? And what about, and I know we've had all kind of conversations, they seem to go in this duo with the Z-Pak. And so explain to people, there's such a run on these medications now and everyone's seeking them out. And I want to explain to everyone, number one, the truth behind those, and number two, with all the doctors here, what I think would be really beneficial if everybody walked away with a fantastic protocol. So I want all of us to mastermind together with all of our experience and give people a good nutritional protocol. So Dr. Cook, tell us about these medications. What are the downsides? Should we be taking them? And should we be taking them just to protect ourselves?
So I don't think that we should be taking them prophylactically. Right now, there's a lot of patients who actually need these medications, people with lupus, people with rheumatoid arthritis, and there was such a run on the medications that a lot of those people actually can't fulfill their prescriptions. So we've sold out of almost every pharmacy, and so I don't know of any pharmacy where you can get it. And then I've actually had a lot of patients call in lately where their doctor called a prescription in, and then the pharmacy refused to fill it without a positive test. And so then we're in a brave new world where, as a doctor, you may not be able to call a prescription in without a validated positive test. And what's going to happen is that the regulatory agencies are going to probably give us guidelines very quickly in terms of what to do. And so then we're not going to be in a position of being able to choose what to do, but we're probably going to be told what to do. That being said, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine have a variety of mechanisms. One is that they may make the cell more resistant to being attached by the virus, One, they can change the pH of the endosome, and so that once the virus gets in, it's less likely to have an effect. Dr. Pedre made a comment the other day about the viroporins and a zinc mechanism. These are not traditionally antiviral drugs, but they seem to have an ability to make our body somewhat resistant to the virus. Both of these drugs, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, can cause neuropathy. That is dose dependent. The higher the dose, the longer people take it, the more likely they are to get it. And it may be related to increased susceptibility for people who are obese, or for people who are older, and for people who are depleted in B vitamins and folate. So we're going to have to strategize supporting people with vitamins before we give it to them. I think we should, if we give it, I think that the answer is going to be to give it once they've got respiratory symptoms, but not or upper respiratory symptoms, but not prophylactically. Then if we add in azithromycin, I think we should add in azithromycin only if they have a pneumonia or it moves into their chest, but not prophylactically either. And then remember that both of these drugs can increase the QT segment, and so then that can lead to irregularities in the heartbeat. And so a physician needs to supervise putting people on these, and then they need to supervise any symptoms, because the worst thing that could happen, we're supposed to be physicians that do no harm. But if people get put on medications that can have cardiac effects, and people are at home and they're doing this by themselves, people can have problems. And there was somebody that took chloroquine phosphate that was designed to be used in a fish tank and died in Arizona the other day. And so and then remember that the studies were extremely looking good, but there are some problems because there's a concept called an intention to treat, and they didn't necessarily include everyone who was enrolled in the study in terms of the final results of that study that came out of France. And so it's rapidly evolving. We need much more information than we have right now. However, from talking to people, and patients have been treated all over the world, my sense is that they both help. And then the other thing, just to comment on the fecal oral route, is that an article came out in Nature today suggesting that there is certainly a gastrointestinal component, and that hand washing should be of paramount importance because of the possibility of fecal oral. So I think if I had to bet money, I'm going to bet money that there's a fecal oral component, and we're seeing information in the literature about that. So.
Okay, great, wonderful information. I'm going to field this one to Dr. Cabeca. Dr. Cabeca, I'm trying to stay motivated and combat the pull towards comfort eating. I'm also trying to stay positive and hopeful. So I want Dr. Shah to comment on what are some things that people can do with food. And Dr. Cabeca, I want you to comment on mood, motivation, all of that. What can people do to keep themselves from going into a dark tunnel during this period?
Yes, and I can completely relate. We can get caught up on the fear pathway as opposed to, just really a trusting, loving pathway. And that's where we put our attention. That's where we direct our thoughts. That will adjust our physiology. So shifting towards positive thinking, looking at what we are grateful for, starting, every minute or every top of every hour with some real positive thoughts, and recognizing when we start to have those fear-based thoughts, concerns, panic, anxiety, to work on shifting that. So habits that can help with creating that inner calm, such as deep breathing, deep belly breathing to stimulate the parasympathetic, to work on heart rate variability, to anything we can do to increase oxytocin, things we can do to laugh and play, and when we can hug in safe situations, being able to increase oxytocin. But really, I think it's directing our thoughts and creating that calm within us, and recognizing what's in our control right now, staying focused on that, and not think so far ahead.
Okay, so Dr. Shah, thank you, Dr. Cabeca. Dr. Shah, give us some pointers on food, diet, nutrition.
This is a really difficult time for people because just like Dr. Cabeca said, people use food in our world. We use food to soothe our anxiety, to soothe our fear, to soothe our stress. People use alcohol to soothe. And you have to remember that a lot of these are wired in your brain from condition from years and years. And so often I had someone tell me today that they had that under control for over 10 years until this pandemic, and the old habits, the old patterns, those ingrained things that from childhood, from teenagers, start to pop up again. The anxiety, the soothing yourself with negative substances such as alcohol, such as food. And so I recognize for myself, for my patients, for all of us, that this is happening. And it's not easy for people to just go back onto their healthy regimen that they were doing 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So that being said, start with really simple, easy steps, like start with eating a lot more fresh fruits and vegetables. Luckily, till today, we still have access to fruits and vegetables, and especially vegetables. Those are the sources of vitamin C and the vitamin A and the prebiotic fiber. And those are the things that are feeding our gut immune cells, the gut bacteria that's talking to your immune cells all day long, every minute of the day. So simple things like just add more vegetables. Just go back to maybe doing 12 hours of a circadian fast. So just 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. You don't need to be running a marathon right now. We're talking about taking baby steps, doing walking, just breaking out of that old negative pattern and starting to rework that a little bit.
Okay, I've got another question to thank you, Dr. Shah. I've got another question here, and then we're going to go to some of the questions that have been pouring in tonight. And I want to put together, before we leave, so everyone hang tight, we're going to put together we're masterminding of the perfect supplement routine for you to be as protective as possible. Here's a question. My parents are in their mid-80s and are very active and healthy, with the exception of asthma and blood pressure. I'm going to leave this one to you, Dr. Cook. I would like to convince them at least 2 alternative measures to take for prevention. They are very suspect of any kind of alternative medicine and supplements. Can you help?
If I was going to give them 2 things, I'd give them quercetin and vitamin C.
Mm-hmm. So quercetin does what? And we know what vitamin C does, and how much should they take?
So quercetin is a flavonoid, and it may have some antiviral effects, and it may help with leaky.
We've lost your sound, Dr. Cook.
He's not on mute. I think we may have lost his connection.
We've lost your connection, Dr. Cook. You may have to log back in.
He's frozen, yes.
Okay, so in moving along, we'll get back to that. So we were talking earlier about this whole concept of vitamin C, and we're going to talk more about that. Some really interesting things are happening.
We might have Dr. Cook back again, Kellyann.
Okay, Dr. Cook, would you like to finish your quercetin?
Oh, it's a great supplement. It's safe, and it seems to have some antiviral effects, and it may have been beneficial for coronavirus in the past. So.
It's one of my favorite supplements. I love quercetin.
And then I'll wait on the vitamin C till the group talks about it.
Okay, great. So let's take one of the questions that have been coming in, and then we're going to go to a mastermind panel of the nutrition.
Yeah, so one question is in terms of travel through the air, which is something that's new in the news today. If someone coughs or sneezes, can the virus travel in the air, and if so, how far?
So how far can the virus travel in the air? Okay. Who wants to take that one?
I think it's actually all this is everything, just so everyone, all the attendees know, we're trying to answer your questions, and we're finding also that the research is changing on almost an hourly, if not quicker than that basis. So if anyone can attempt that one, that'd be great.
Well, the official right now is a 6 feet separation, and that's what different cities are telling their citizens. That's the notifications I'm getting from New York City. But there was one report where it might have, someone might have been infected who was at a longer distance away. And it depends on what type of environment you're in. If you're in an enclosed environment and there's enough time for those particles to move around and there's not wind or something to disperse them, we know, like Amy was talking about earlier, these droplets, if someone coughs, can stay in the air for up to 30 minutes before they settle down on surfaces. And if anybody remembers old science, Brownian motion, air, even though it doesn't look like it's moving, if you look at air particles, they're actually bouncing around and moving. And that movement of what seems to be still air is going to disperse these particles and have them move a greater distance than just the nearby area where the person coughed. And that's why they're suggesting a 6 feet separation. But I think we have yet to determine that, depending on the situation. If you're outdoors, you're probably safe at 6 feet. If you're in an enclosed space, that might be questionable.
I have a question that actually was asked the last time and we didn't get to it, and I will agree with this person that submitted it, that it hasn't been talked a lot about in the news, etc. Is, what is the protocol if your spouse or someone in your family gets sick? How do you take care of them to make sure it doesn't spread throughout the household? As well as the second to that question is, if it does get to their lungs, is it possible to heal past this in one's immune system?
Dr. Shah, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yes. I think there is no protocol, but I think that we know that basically quarantining that person completely away from the family, meaning like not leaving that room for the entire period of time, is probably the best protocol. And there's been talk about, if you live with elderly family members, you may want to quarantine that person away from the family members, which is difficult when you're all in one place. But it's very important to keep that person really away from the rest of the family, including meal times, etc. The second question was, can they recover if it involves their lungs? From what we understand, yes, you can recover from lung involvement. It's kind of like a pneumonia, and there are bacterial superinfections that seem to happen with it as well, but it's similar to that type of recovery. Again, we don't really know who is more likely to recover, who is more likely to get the pneumonia, who is the best patient to give this combination therapy with azithromycin and hydrochloroquine. All of that is unknown, but I would say that I think there's a lot of fear about like death from this virus. And I will tell you that, from being optimistic, that the death rate so far in New York actually is not as high as was seen in China or Italy. So we're hopeful for that.
Mm-hmm. And we need to be hopeful and do all we can to build that armor around us, which brings me to the next kind of forum here. I think everyone wants to know how, given all this information, what really is the best protective plan? So I'd like all of us to just kind of talk openly about what plan that they can walk away with today that will help them. And I want to start with this concept of vitamin C, because I know, Dr. Pedre, you had your own personal story in regard to vitamin C and how it may have pulled you out of the woods. And there was also a story that you and I had shared today about a doctor that was dosing with vitamin C and the positive effects of that. So let's start by, we all can agree that vitamin C is definitely something someone should be taking, and it's pretty powerful. So Dr. Pedre, talk a little bit about the differences in the types of vitamin C, the different transport systems. I know that you like IVs, and now we're getting powders. And so what's the best way to take vitamin C? How much should we be taking? If we start to feel ill, should we increase that, and to what? And what were your experiences?
Well, everybody knows vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant, but what they might not know is that when it's administered intravenously, you can reach 10 times the levels that you would if you take it orally. So it takes much higher doses orally to be able to achieve the same levels you could intravenously. And if you give a certain level of vitamin C intravenously, once you're crossing like 15 grams or so, then what happens is vitamin C goes from not just being an antioxidant, but it actually is a pro-oxidant And guess what it creates? It creates hydrogen peroxide at the cellular level. And what do your white blood cells do to kill invaders like a virus? They create hydrogen peroxide. So vitamin C can do the same thing. And I had my own experience. I don't know if I suspect that I was exposed from having traveled to Miami one weekend before I got sick. So 7 days later, didn't have a fever initially. I just developed full body exhaustion, headache that was centered here, and just feeling my eyes were sunken, which is kind of a feeling that I've noted with patients and myself as one of those symptoms you get when you have a viral infection. You can kind of feel like your eyes are sunken and they get heavy. And the next day I was at work and I had the headache, and I was thinking, this is so weird. Like, I have had zero respiratory symptoms, but I decided, let me take my temperature. And I had a low grade temperature of 99.7. I was surprised. And I actually took it 3 times just to make sure that it was correct. Because I just have a headache and my body feels I'm a bit tired. So I luckily have intravenous vitamin C at my office. And so immediately I had my medical assistant create a bag for me, and I laid down in one of the patient rooms, gave myself vitamin C, much higher doses. So I want to talk about the doses the pulmonologist is using in the hospitals here in New York, which is really tiny dose. I gave myself 12.5 grams of vitamin C, 12,500 milligrams, along with other vitamins. So it wasn't just vitamin C, it was B vitamins, it was magnesium. We put zinc in that bag as well. And by the end of the bag, my body fatigue was gone, fever was gone. I checked my temperature, gone. I felt like I had been completely rebooted. And now I think that happened, say I did get this, and I'm waiting for kits that check for IgG and IgM. So I'm going to test myself to see if I develop an immune response. So I'm really curious to see if I was exposed. But if I did, then you can resolve this really quickly with vitamin C. And now we're seeing the pulmonologists in some of the New York hospitals using vitamin C at a much lower dose. So he's dosing 1,500 milligrams 3 times a day. So only 4.5 grams per day, which in my opinion is not enough. The studies they did in China with vitamin C, they were dosing people 7.5 grams to 15 grams intravenously. And I think you have to go at the higher doses. We know that vitamin C it gets depleted when you're under stress. The adrenals, in cases, someone who's ending up in the ICU is going to be under severe stress. So their adrenals are going to be pumping out cortisol, and they're going to be depleted of vitamin C. So you have to restore that. But vitamin C also, I was talking about last night, stops the worst part of this infection, which is what kills people, the cytokine storm. So vitamin C can stop those inflammasomes, that trigger that happens inside the cell, and then basically creates a runaway train inside the cell that sets off, it's like setting off a forest fire inside your cell, and your cell can't control it. But if you bring vitamin C in, that's one of those nutrients. It is, the incredible thing is, we're not talking about hydroxychloroquine, we're not talking about Zithromax, we're talking about something that is available cheaply, that could be given to people intravenously in the worst condition. At most, it's not going to do damage because so many people are deficient in vitamin C, especially intracellularly. And at best, it's going to reverse the lung damage. And actually, I have my medical assistant right now is sick after we closed the office, and he developed fevers and chills. And I've had him on an oral vitamin C protocol. And today I had him increase the dose of vitamin C. And he told me as soon as he took the higher dose, he felt better within like 30 minutes.
What was that dose?
I had him take, so you can basically take vitamin C to bowel tolerance. So vitamin C at very high doses is going to cause you to have a loose stool. So I had him taking 2,500 milligrams of vitamin C 3 times a day, so 7,500 milligrams orally. But I have another patient who regularly takes 10 to 20,000 units a day. So she went all the way up to 60,000 units spread out through the day.
Hold on 1 second, Dr. Pedre, because we're getting some questions. Explain to people, when you say oral vitamin C, they're not sure what you mean.
Okay.
So let's be really clear. Is it tablets? Is it powder? Do they mix it in water? And to start out, if they don't have a problem, they just want to save.
It can come in different forms, but it's much easier to take vitamin C in capsules or also in a liposomal form. But I challenge you right now, because liposomal vitamin C or ester C are the best, most absorbable versions of C. I challenge you to find a website that has it and is not out of stock. It has sold out everywhere that I'm looking. I mean, I think you need to go to like local health food stores to find it. But you can orally, it's just like I said, it's 10 times stronger when you do it intravenously. So if an intravenous dose of 12.5 grams was good for me, then imagine you have to take 10 times that dose, which is hard to take. So you have to tell people, look, you take it to your bowel tolerance, and typically what we advise is take 1,000 milligrams every 30 to 60 minutes until you have a loose stool. And that is your ceiling dose. So you go one dose below that, and that's what you continue taking on a daily basis. And this is not a preventive, this is if you're getting sick. And vitamin C can help protect you against that cytokine storm, which is what ends up killing you. It's not the virus that kills people, it's the reaction to the virus that is killing people.
So the dose is 1,000 milligrams until a loose stool. How often did you say?
Every 30 to 60 minutes. And then, so maybe you get to 7,000 milligrams, maybe another person gets to 10,000 and then they have a loose stool. So then you go back down to 9,000 milligrams. And that's the dose you'll take every day until you're feeling better.
So if someone's not, they feel fine, they just want it as protective, is it 2,000 a day?
2,000.
Okay.
I would say that's the minimum, 2,000 milligrams daily as a protective.
And your favorite kind of vitamin C is the liposomal, but that's hard to get. So
try to find it. If not, ester C or buffered C, so it protects your stomach from the acidity of the ascorbic acid. And honestly, I'm telling my patients now, like, forget about what is best. Just get vitamin C in whatever form you can find it, because I'm having a lot of trouble finding vitamin C for patients, and I was looking online. So I just say, whatever form you can find, it's better than not taking any.
Great advice. So let's talk a little bit about vitamin D. Dr. Shah, how much vitamin D should someone take, in what form? What are they looking for when they go to buy it? Give us from A to Z.
Vitamin D, you wanted to get a vitamin D3. That's the most absorbable form of vitamin D. You want to, it depends, the dosing really does depend. If prophylactically, you'd want to dose to your deficiency. So between 1 and 10,000 is like the dose, but I take 4,000 IUs a day to treat myself and prophylactically. It is not, it's unlike vitamin C, it cannot just be, it's not water soluble. So you can't just pee it out. It's actually fat soluble, A, D, E, and K. And so you have to be careful that you're not telling the public to just take high doses of vitamin D without having a level checked before you do it. But I definitely think that deficiency of vitamin D can be easily corrected and should be corrected in this setting if you want to set yourself up for best immune response to a virus. So vitamin D is a key vitamin.
So for protective, they want vitamin D3. It comes in tablet forms, and you're saying about how much? About 4,000, 4 to 6,000, would you say?
IU, yes. 4 to 6,000 IU.
So about 4 to 6,000 IU. If they get an onset of symptoms, if symptomology occurs, then what's their dosage?
There's really, that's a difficult one. I don't know if someone else wants to feel that one. I really don't, I don't know if boosting up your vitamin D in that acute setting is really going to do much, or at least I don't know of any evidence.
I've tested it on myself and multiple patients, and just clinically, And over the years of being a doctor, I've just always gotten the feedback that as soon as they took a mega dose of vitamin D, they felt the difference. And I can tell you that I've verified that on my own self-scientific observation multiple times.
I've used it as well.
I will tell you what Dr. Shah said, and I know that for myself, that is one area I like empirical data. And I know we're in an emergent situation right now, but when I triple dose or
I will say, okay, so just kind of remembering, I did see a while back a study where they did IM 100,000 unit vitamin D injections to patients who were in a nursing home, and they found that it decreased the incidence of respiratory infections in that nursing home. And they did it once a month, 100,000 units once a month, intramuscularly.
And that's good evidence. That's some good evidence. So we all agree vitamin C. We all agree vitamin D. The questions come in continually about elderberry. So Dr. Cook, do you know anything about elderberry and its effects? And, you know, I keep hearing conflicting information about elderberry and being protective or helping on the onset of this cough. I don't want to mask the cough. They should take it, you know, they should know that this cough could lead you down that road that we don't want to go on, and it has to be addressed. But what do you think about elderberry?
So I'm going to some extent, flip this to everyone else. There's 4 or 5 categories that you could talk about, like whether people should stay on ACE inhibitors, whether they should take vitamin D, whether they should take elderberry. There's a tiny bit of evidence that says maybe you should not, but then the general experience probably of all of our careers is that it's good to take. And I think that we're going to find out that it's good to take. I saw the thing come across elderberry, and I'm not the perfect person to answer that question, but my gestalt is that we've used it for a lot of people with viral infections and flu. And so I think that at the end of this, the answer is going to be it's a good thing to take, but does anybody have a better answer than that?
I can comment on that because I was so, can I say PO'd back in the days of the swine flu epidemic and all the hoopla that was being made on that. So I decided to research all types of natural remedies. And it turns out that elderberry is, I think, it's the same as Tamiflu. It's a neuraminidase inhibitor in a sense, and it has an effect that it helps prevent the flu virus from infecting neighboring cells. And it's also an antioxidant. And they did studies where they looked at its effects on all the different types of flu, the H1N1 pandemic flu, and it was able to block all types of flu viruses, influenza A, B, and pandemic from infecting neighboring cells. And I read a comment by Dr. David Brady, who's been one of the chief formulators and has, for Designs for Health. And he said, look, there is some evidence that partly the way that elderberry works, it might increase the cytokine storm, but it also decreases it at the same time. And honestly, if you're having a cytokine storm, elderberry is not going to be the reason that you're having that. It's your body's reaction to the effects of the virus. That's what's happening.
Yes.
So,
well, I have a comment. Just to play devil's advocate, I'm a minimalist. Say you are a minimalist and you want to get most of your vitamins from exercise, sleep, and whatever, the things that are very clear. I think for me, it's very clear that D is helpful in this situation. For when I did look at the studies that did show that it can enhance the cytokine storm, and that's partially how it works in setting of viruses. So in my own mind, and everybody can make their own decision, but in my own mind, since I'm a minimalist, I'm not going to be taking 15 things every day. I'm going to skip the elderberry for this particular pandemic. Not saying I'll never use it. I definitely will use it. I definitely think it's a great thing to use. But because of that small risk-benefit ratio we're talking about, I mean, the risk is slight, but there's no risk in not, I'd rather skip it.
Spoken like a true mother with 10 million things to do and 10 million things.
Yeah,
I'm gonna play devil's advocate to your devil's advocate.
Yeah, sure.
And just remind people.
Tiebreaker. I didn't want it to come to this guy.
I just want to remind people that, we're all focused on coronavirus. Well, guess what? It's not the only virus circulating, and there's still influenza circulating out there as well. And there might be more than one coronavirus. As we know, year after year, there could be more than one version circulating all at once. So just to remind people that we're probably not just seeing coronavirus right now.
That is a great point. So actually there's a question that a couple people have asked this question because it's also high seasonal allergy time, fun, just to add confusion to the situation we have today. So when someone's taking their anti-allergy or their allergy immune protocol in terms of, decongestants, et cetera, is this are people with allergies more susceptible to the coronavirus is what they're asking?
Dr. Cook?
Well, we know that people with allergies are more susceptible to pulmonary problems. And so then if somebody is having asthma exacerbations, they sometimes have a higher susceptibility to getting a superinfection or a pneumonia. So it seems hypothetical. Look, I don't think I have the answer. Maybe I'd be curious if anybody else has an answer. But
We've lost the connection, Dr. Cook.
He's muted.
I don't think right now there is an increased risk that's documented for people with asthma or allergies.
Okay.
I do want to mention though that the supplement, the nutrient he mentioned, the bioflavonoid quercetin, works together with vitamin C to stabilize mast cells. So it's not only great advice for this pandemic, but it's also great for allergy season.
Yes, it's one of my high point supplements. Let's talk a moment about.
One thing just to remember for quercetin, it does use the P450 system. So if you're using other medications that also use that system, you need to dose accordingly. So if you're a new start, you should check with your doctor about that.
Oh, okay. Is there any medications that are very common that people should watch out for before dosing with quercetin?
Oh, many. I can't even think on the top of my head. I mean, there's many.
I would say antifungals, like anyone who's on an antifungal, which uses the same P450 system, you want to be careful there.
Let's talk a moment about zinc, because I think that's another power player in all this. What I like about zinc is there seems to be a lot of studies that show that it actually does work pretty well. So far we've talked about vitamin D3. We've talked about D3 400 to 600 IUs. We've talked about vitamin C at about 2,000 milligrams for a regular maintenance protocol, and taking it to bowel tolerance, 1,000 milligrams until you have loose stools if you have the onset, about every 30 minutes if you have the onset of any problems. Now I'd like to talk about zinc because I'd love to pair that with C. So Dr. Cabeca, how much zinc should someone be taking, and is there a certain kind of form that's better than the other?
Yeah, typically I like a zinc glycinate, and anywhere between 30 to 60 milligrams, because there's a lot of stress right now. I don't know how many people are experiencing stress-related hair loss. Let me tell you, there's a lot of things to worry about, but that's a really big issue with cortisol, because that activates the 5-alpha reductase enzyme that converts testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. So zinc helps block that enzyme. So I know that's a really big concern many times in my menopausal clientele. So we typically say 30 to 60 milligrams of zinc on a daily basis in general, especially if you're experiencing that side effect. And for autoimmune support, that's the range that typically I recommend.
Okay, and you said what form zinc?
I use a zinc glycinate.
Zinc glycinate, okay. So we've got a really nice protocol.
So there's a one quick thing. Don't really want to be on zinc for months and months and months without looking at copper. You have to worry about copper deficiency.
And you can actually measure your red blood cell zinc, not serum zinc, but red blood cell zinc. And while we're at it, measure red blood cell magnesium and make sure we're on sufficient levels of magnesium as well. But I agree, zinc copper ratio is important to look at long term.
And I also want to add, if I may, anything that thins the mucus, so natural mucolytics, are really powerful and helpful in this situation. And you can go to my website and you'll see a lot of copy on that. Anything that's hot, cayenne, anything like that, it naturally thins the mucus. And this is important. Everyone should be drinking more hot liquids than they probably have in the past. Keep your body warm. Lemon water, I love. It's something very simple. There you go. Dr. Pedre and I are always like this. We're always like this, my friend. So that lemon water, that citrus in there, that vitamin C. Hey, Dr. Cook. Okay, I know Dr. Cabeca. She's always doing greens, this, that. She's always got something going. Dr. Shah.
Oh.
And you wonder why I love this woman. This is why I love. So ashwagandha. Dr. Cabeca,
Adrenal
is that
support.
helpful? Okay, so is that something, and Dr. Shaw is smiling, so she must love this as well. Is this something that we should be taking as a stress safeguard? And, you know, I know you're a minimalist, Dr. Shaw, so you're probably just thinking, no, give me the zinc, give me the vitamin D, give me the C, I'm done. But Dr. Cabeca, is that helpful for us right now, and should we be taking that?
For adrenal adaptogens, you know, I'm going to say maca, you know, my favorite, mighty maca. So, but ashwagandha on a regular basis, especially now with feeling stressed, to support our adrenals, that, you know, there are definite benefits to ashwagandha. I have deferred to combinations of using specifically maca with adaptogens like resveratrol, quercetin, and using turmeric and green tea extract, grapeseed extract. These other combinations are great to add to the system. So, Amy, what do you think about ashwagandha?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of ashwagandha. That's kind of something I used a lot when I was kind of in a dark place where I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, after resetting the diet, after resetting my sleep and stress control. That was one of the ashwagandha and rhodiola adaptogens, along with vitamin D. B vitamins was something that I used in combination and really took me out of that bad place. And so I'm a huge fan of that. And I think that that's something that can really help at a time like this too.
I call it the anti-funk stuff. It kind of gets everyone out of a funk. There's a lot of benefits to that's called ashwagandha. Dr. Cabeca, how much should someone take? Is there a particular kind of form? How should they buy this?
I can speak to that. It should be heavy metal tested, because this is one of the biggest problems is there's contaminants in these herbal products, and you want to make sure it's heavy metal tested, 300 to 600 milligrams a day, and you want to ideally take an organic source.
We've been hearing a lot. Thank you for that. So that's a fairly decent protocol there. We hear a lot about, you know, good oils. Should we take oils, the omega-3 versus omega-3, omega-6? What should we add this? I mean, and I do like what Dr. Shaw is saying about keeping it minimalistic, because I do think I have found that two things keep people on track. Number one, if they see empirical data, if they see the data and they see data improving, that's very motivational for patients. And the second thing is if they don't feel extra overwhelmed. So somehow you have to get through that point of darkness and then maybe add more things. But when someone is starting out or trying to figure all this out, keeping it minimalistic is often helpful. So given that, what would you add oils to this protocol right now? Or do you think, you know, we came up with the bare nuts and bolts, and I hope everyone listening, I hope that that's something that they're going to add. We talked about the vitamin C, we talked about vitamin D, we talked about quercetin. That's another good one. I think that's worth adding. We talked about zinc. I would love for everyone to take that on a routine basis starting now. So what about oils? Because I know probiotics, probiotics I've learned a lot. And of course, Dr. Pedre, I'm going to have you field that one since you're the gut doctor. But so what should we be taking in addition to this? So I would say that would be our core foundational package, right? Our core foundational immune package. What would you take beyond that? And so the question is fish oils and probiotics are the two things I want to address. Dr. Cook, do you have any thoughts on fish oils?
I think anything we can do to help stabilize the cell, and I think the fish oils can help us have a better integrity of our cell walls. And so I think that's a good thing to do. And I would have a diversity of oils, and you can use ozone oil, and there's ozonated olive oil and ozonated linseed oil, and I think those are both good. But definitely, if you have an availability of those things, I would definitely add them. I think probiotics are a good idea as well.
Okay, so nobody knows what ozonated means. So tell them so just give a brief explanation because we're running out of time. What is ozonated supplements, and where can they find them?
So if you bottle ozone, which has antiviral and antibacterial properties, through an oil, the oil mixes with the ozone and forms lipid peroxides, and then you can ingest those. And those have been used by integrative doctors, probably like some of us, for years and years and years to treat infections and things like that. And so then they can take and they can encapsulate that into a pill, and then you can take those pills. And so we've been using that as one of our prophylactic strategies, in addition to taking high quality fish oils.
Okay, great. And so fish oils, if someone was going to buy them, is there anything in particular that they look for? Anyone can take that question. What are the absolute musts when you're buying fish oil that they have to look for?
Definitely you want to look that they've been heavy metal screened. So heavy metals and sustainably sourced. I think that's really important. And we look at the EPA to DHA concentration. A lot of times you can get fish oil over this is what drove me into functional medicine and nutrition, was as an obstetrician recommending omega-3s and then finding out one major brand was pulled off the shelves for high levels of heavy metals, mercury. And so you really have to look and look at some great sources. Like I like Nordic Naturals as a general source that has been around for a long time and that they are tested for heavy metals. So 1,000 IUs of an omega-3 could have as little as 90 to 60 EPA DHA versus a high quality one could have 460 to 320 EPA to DHA, and you want those higher quality concentrated ones. And at this time, I'd probably do at least one twice a day, if not one 3 times a day.
Okay, so that's a nice add-on to the protocol that we have, and I think it's important. And so, Dr. Pedre, I'm gonna mention one before we close. But Dr. Pedre, what about probiotics? Should we be adding them in?
Probiotics are not a bad idea. And the reason for that is that the gut is the biggest reservoir of the immune system. So 70% of your immune system lives all along the gut lining. And if your gut is inflamed, and that's kind of going back a little bit to the conversation from yesterday where I talked about the terrain, like your body and your ability to fight off an infection. Well, if you're already starting with a compromised terrain in your gut, which to me is like the roots of the body, the same as the roots to a tree. It's one of the most essential parts of the body. If that terrain is inflamed because you have the wrong bacteria, inflammatory bacteria, then they're going to be sending signals that are already going to have your immune system on alert. But at the same token, it's going to distract your immune system. So your immune system then can't do the right work of defending you from a virus that's coming in through the respiratory tract. So probiotics can be really key and important for that. And that is a whole long conversation. So I'm going to stop there.
So if someone goes to buy them, what are they looking for?
You want to look usually for a probiotics that has a mix of strains. You want them to have different strains of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. You might also see a friendly yeast mixed in there, a Saccharomyces. So the best probiotics are going to be probably a multi-strain probiotic, and the best ones are the ones that are telling you what amount of each is in there, because sometimes they just say proprietary formula, and then they just have a mix of bacteria, but you don't know how much of each one is in there. So look for one that is honest and tells you how much of each bacterial strain they're putting in there, and one that has at least a combination of 5 to 10 different strains. that represent kind of the more favorable bacteria that we know that live in the gut and have a generally anti-inflammatory effect in the body, and they help maintain the integrity of the gut border, which is one of the most important things for controlling inflammation in the body.
Terrific. So we gave you a nice little list here. You've got all of that. So that's a nice protocol. We've got your core protocol. And then if you want to extend it out to these extra little pieces that are helpful, that would be amazing for you. So I want to end because we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes, but we have so many questions still coming in. It's just a great topic to really dig in and get you some help so you can build that armor around you mentally, emotionally, and inside, internally, in every way of your life, and that everywhere in every side of your life. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're committed to do. I'm going to end with a quick fire question to all the doctors. If there is one food that you would recommend that they start eating now to protect themselves, what is the one food that you could recommend? We'll start with you, Dr. Cabeca. What's the one food you would recommend?
I'm totally stealing yours, Kellyann. Bone broth with some lemon juice and cayenne pepper.
Oh,
Top it off. Himalayan sea salt.
Deal away, Dr. Pedre.
I'm going to throw in some mushrooms in there. Maitakes, matsutake mushrooms are actually have the highest concentration of vitamin D that you can get. And also shiitakes, because they help boost natural killer cells, which are going to make you more virus proof.
Wonderful. Dr. Cook.
Organic organ meats.
Oh, now we have not talked about that. Profound difference, and that's a great way to give yourself some natural zinc too. There's actually a lot of zinc in organ meats too. So I believe Dr. Shah has left the building. Is that correct, Stacy?
That is correct. Unfortunately, she had to leave to take a call with a patient, but we will thank her for her time.
So thank you to Dr. Shah, even though she's not here. Thank you, Dr. Cabeca. Thank you, Dr. Pedre. Thank you, Dr. Cook. It has been amazing, and I have a feeling they'll be seeing us around the block again. This seems to be a squad that's not going away. I wish everyone all the best. I wish everyone health and wellness, and we're leaving you with all the grace and love in the world. We're here for you. Your power doctors, your doctors that are your true seekers. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.